So as of the time of this recording, Gojo Satoru has been sealed for 1,000 days in our time, or at least according to how long in the box on Twitter, and you should definitely go follow them after you've watched this video. My name is Dynamic Weeb, or Andy, and in today's video I'm going to cover the most major events since Gojo's sealing in Jujutsu Kaisen manga. This should be obvious by now, but spoiler warning ahead. Megumi comes face to face with his father Toji Zenin. They then fight and Megumi wins by way of Toji committing by stabbing himself in the head to stop himself from further harming Megumi. Sukuna is awakened for the third time in the series, fully taking over Yuji's body. He then goes out on a rampage throughout Shibuya, and in the short time that he is alive, kills Mimiko, Nanako, then proceeds to fight with Jogo after a one-sided battle. Jogo is then killed. Megumi summons the Maharaga. Sukuna ends up fighting the Maharaga, and then uses his domain expansion. Sukuna then proceeds to kill the Maharaga and destroy half of Shibuya and kill everyone and almost everything in the domain's range in the process. Thinking they had escaped the chaos by way of Haruto's curse technique that stores miracles, Haruto is then also killed by Sakuna. Sakuna then lets Yuji take control of his body back to show him what damage has been done. Yuji then throws up at the sight of most of Shibuya being wiped out, realizing he'd been used to wipe out any living thing in the radius of the domain expansion. Nanami is shown on the brink of death and is using the last of his energy to fight the cursed spirits left by Mahito, but then runs into Mahito himself, who then kills Nanami, while Yuji watches. Yuji flies into a rage at Mahito and the two begin to fight. A clone made earlier by Mahito actually runs into Nobara and the two begin also to fight. Nobara figures out that her Renaissance technique will hit both the clone and the original version of Mahito. Mahito then decides, "F this, I'm running away." As it turns out, Mahito actually runs to the original Mahito, leading both Yuji and Nobara together. The original Mahito is able to land his technique on Nobara in a direct hit. Mahito activates his technique and seemingly kills Nobara. Yuji has a mental breakdown after going through so much in such a short amount of time, but Mahito doesn't let up and instead attacks Yuji, landing a black flash on him. When all hope is lost, Todo joins the battle to give Yuji a pep talk. Todo uses Boogie Woogie to fight Mahito while Yuji is having a mental breakdown. Yuji and Todo continue to fight Mahito, who is slowly being worn down. Todo manages to land his own black flash, and we learn that all three fighters, both Yuji, Todo and Mahito, are all running at 120% potential, which is kind of insane when you think about it. Mahito decided to copy what Gojo did during their fight and uses a domain expansion for 0.2 seconds in order to not be killed by Sakuna. Remember, if Mahito's domain touches Yuji, Sakuna will kill him by way of Mahito trying to touch Sakuna's soul. In the 0.2 seconds this happens, Mahito lands a hit on Todo's arm and then activates his idle transfiguration technique. Todo then off his own arm to save his body. Mahito seizes this chance and hits Todo with a black flash. Todo then uses the advance in Mahito's hand and activates his Boogie Woogie technique for Yuji to land his own black flash, trading blows instantly. After taking such a beating for so long, Mahito finally achieves his final form. Instant Spirit of Distorted Killing. Bit of a long-winded name if you ask me, but no judgment from me. Yuji and Mahito continue the fight without Todo. Todo then rejoins the fight like Gandalf the White and uses Boogie Woogie once more to further fuck up Mahito, but it turns out that Mahito was so used to the switch, he guards where he thinks the attack will come from, only to find out it was actually just a ruse and Todo had lied about activating the technique. Yuji hits a massive black flash on an unguarded Mahito. Yuji then intends to finish off Mahito, but suguru Geto appears out of nowhere like an RKO. Mahito is then absorbed by Geto. Finally, the rest of the sorcerers arrive in time to help Yuji. Choso arrives on the battlefield and reveals that Yuji is actually his little brother for some reason, and we also learn that Kenjaku had inhabited the body of Noritoshi Kamo at some point, who was the blot on the Kamo bloodline. Choso and Geto end up fighting, and Yurimi joins in to freeze almost everyone on the battlefield. Just as everything is looking bad, Geto's former teacher and friend Yuki Tsukumo shows up to help our gang. The two discuss their world use and what they want out of the world, Geto wanting optimized cursed energy and Yuki wanting to break away from cursed energy altogether. Geto moves forward with his plan by using idle transfiguration on everyone who couldn't use cursed energy up until now, to now allow them to use cursed energy. We then see Sugmiki Fushiguro, who was Megumi's little sister, awakening from a long time coma, having been marked by Geto's technique in the past. Geto then reveals his plans to create the Culling Games and have everyone who was marked by his cursed energy fight each other and learn more about cursed energy. I want you all to bear in mind that everything that I just went through all happened within the space of a couple of hours after Gojo being sealed. Possibly all within the hour of this. And we still have a lot more to cover, so buckle your seatbelts. Swiftly moving on, we learn that best boy Yuta Okatsu is actually back on the scene, and not only that, he reveals that Rika is also alive and kicking, or in this case, swatting demons against a wall. When we see Yuta in a meeting with the higher-ups, he's vowing to kill Itadori, Yuji. We also learn of 5 special notices that were issued from the Jujutsu Highs following the events of the Shibuya incident, and they are as follows. Suguru Geto's survival has been confirmed and that he is sentenced to death again. Satoru Gojo has been deemed an accomplice in the Shibuya incident and is exiled. Also, anyone who attempts to remove the seal will also be considered a criminal of the Jujutsu world. Principal Yaga has been given the death penalty for inciting the Shibuya incident through Geto and Gojo and is to be executed immediately. Itadori's death sentence suspension is cancelled and is to be carried out immediately. The appointed executioner of Yuji is none other than special grade sorcerer Yuta Okotsu. So remember when Toji sold Megumi to Gojo to be trained to have a better chance in life? Well, it turns out that Toji made a written agreement with the current head of the Zenin clan that should anything happen to Gojo, Megumi will be welcomed back into the Zenin clan and made head of the family. Now Zenin decides to head to Tokyo and track down and kill both Itadori and Megumi in order to secure his place as the head of the Zenin family. Now you find Yuji and Choso Cursed spirits and the 3 decide to fight. While the 3 sorcerers are fighting, none other than Yuta Okotsu joins the fray, his cursed energy alone stopping all 3 sorcerers in their tracks, and Yuji even mistaking it for Gojo at first. The 4 sorcerers split up into 2 groups, Choso vs Naoya and Okotsu vs Yuji. While Okotsu is chasing Yuji, they both make the same statement about how fast each other are and are shocked by each other's skills. Okotsu reveals that he has more cursed energy than Gojo does, but because of Gojo's 6 eyes ability, when Gojo uses a technique, the energy expended is almost close to 0. Rika is finally revealed to be very much alive and kicking, or in this case alive and holding onto Yuji's head for safekeeping. Okotsu then stabs Yuji in the chest, however Sakuna doesn't interfere this time as he knows there's something more that's happening. Cutting back to Naoya and Choso's fight, we see Choso getting the upper hand on a cocky Naoya and almost losing the fight. We also learn that Choso is over 150 years old. Just as Choso's supernova technique lands, Yuta appears behind Choso, dragging with him the body of one Yuji Itadori, and he then knocks out Choso. We then see a dream that Yuji is having involving his father, grandpa, and mother. We also see that Yuji's mother has the same scar across her forehead in the same way that everyone who has been taken over by Kenjaku has, all but confirming that Yuji is the child of Kenjaku. Yuji then wakes up next to Okotsu, who is relieved to see him alive and is obviously confused. Yuji is wondering what the hell is going on. Okotsu explains that Gojo had asked him to take care of the first and second year students should anything happen to him. He also mentions that Hakari should be fine in quotation marks. You'll see why he says this later on in the video. Okotsu casually reveals that Yuji was killed by him but was brought back to life by the reverse curse technique. Megumi meets Yuji for the first time since Shibuya. This is where things start to get a bit complicated, so I'll do my best to keep everything short and sweet to avoid further complications. The Culling Games is announced and these are the rules. Following the events of Shibuya incident, Yuji asks Okotsu to without any hesitation should he ever switch with Sakuna ever again. Yuji asks Megumi about Nobara, and I want to point out that it's never explicitly said whether Nobara is dead or not. This will most likely be an important point later on down the line. We learn that Maki is alive and well, but now with burn scars since the Shibuya incident. The group travel through the tunnels to reach Master Tengen and walk past where Toji once fought against Geto and killed Star Plasma Vessel in the Hidden Inventory arc. Finally, they come face to face with Master Tengen. Master Tengen reveals that the sorcerer's name who's controlling Suguru Geto is Kenjaku, a sorcerer who's been around for hundreds of years. Yuji then asks why Tengen looks so weird, and Tengen responds with, after 500 years, you'd look like this too. This is never fully explained, but my theory is it's to do with how long he's been alive and the uses of cursed energy, bringing him closer in line to how a cursed spirit would look. This is where the arc gets quite text heavy with lots of exposition, so I'll do my best to cover the most important and essential parts. Tengen reveals that he will help the group in exchange for 2 guards, out of Okotsu, Tsukumo, or Choso. Tengen tells the group that Kenjaku's plan is to merge humankind with Master Tengen to truly optimize cursed energy, as he stated in the Shibuya arc. Tengen then reveals that he is more cursed spirit than human, which makes him a target for Geto's cursed spirit manipulation. Choso and Tsukumo decide to stay and guard Tengen. Tengen then gives the group back to the prison realm. As it turns out, 2 of the objects needed to unseal the prison realm by force have already been shown previously. One is the blade that Toji Zenin was using, and the other is a cursed rope that Miguel used to fight with Gojo in the Jujutsu Kaisen Zero film or manga. If you haven't already, I'd highly recommend reading or watching both if you can. We'll then introduce to Hana Kurusu, who's also known as Angel. This is a sorcerer from over 1,000 years ago whose curse technique allows to extinguish any other curse technique. Tengen then further explains that players have a certain amount of time to express their decision to play in the Culling Games. If they don't enter, they are subject to curse technique removal, which basically kills in most cases. After some further explaining from Tengen, Maki sums up the plans. Choso and Tsukumo stay with Tengen. Kotsu enters the colony first to gain info. Megumi and Yuji would go to find Hakari and try to recruit him to help out. Kotsu mentions that Hakari is actually stronger than him when he gets worked up, and you'll see why this may be true later on down the line, even though Maki disagrees. We're then introduced to Takaba, who was also competing in the Culling Games. Cut back to Principal Yaga, who's sentenced to death. cornered by Principal Gaku Ganji. A fight breaks out between the three, and we see that Yaga is cut down, but we don't get to see the fight. But I would have liked to have seen that fight. Panda arrives in time to see what has become of Principal Yaga, and we learn that pandas can cry. This isn't a major moment, but it hit me in the feels, and it needed to be addressed. Maki arrives at the Zenin house to collect the case tools needed. Here, Naoya trades some not so nice words, and Maki makes her way to the warehouse, only to find her father had cleared it out and is sat in front of an injured Mai. It's then revealed that Maki, Mai, and Megumi are all to be killed by the Zenin clan for plotting to help Gojo Satoru. Maki and her father then begin to fight. After a quick and decisive battle, Maki's father drags both Maki and Mai into a room filled with low-grade cursed spirits and leaves them to die. We then get this dream sequence between Maki and Mai, which Mai states that they are basically the same person. The dream sequence ends and we see that Mai sacrificed herself to make a sword for Maki that looks strangely familiar. So at this point we start to see just how powerful Maki has become, and her father looks at her and we see that comparison of her and Toji Zenin. Maki then proceeds to cut her dad's head in half and refers to the sword as Maki, saying, "Let's get started." It's at this point things take a grisly turn. We see Maki is surrounded by guards of the Zenin household, only for them to be cut mercilessly down by the newly empowered Maki. Maki comes face to face with the Hei, a group recognized as the strongest in the Zenin clan for their semi-grade 1 techniques. After a short-lived fight, Maki simply obliterates the Hei, only to come face to face with Naoya. The two begin to fight, and as things start to look bad for Maki, she plans to catch Naoya head on, and Naoya is hit with a full force punch from Maki. We learn that Naoya actually survived the fight and crawled away, only to be killed by his own mother. Now remember that this part is super important on how Naoya is killed. Yuji and Megumi go to find Hakari, who we learn is hosting an underground fight club for sorcerers. As it turns out, Yuji's first opponent in the fight club to enter Hakari's trust is actually none other than Panda. Yuji and Panda begin to fight while discussing about their plan to get Hakari to join them, and then we are finally introduced to Hakari. Yuji and Hakari finally meet, and we learn that Hakari is a bit of a swindler, gambler, and a con man. Side note, this is going to be very, very relevant later on down the line. Bear this in mind. Hakari realizes that Yuji hasn't been telling the truth, and the two begin to fight. The fight breaks out onto the roof where Hakari decides to listen to the gang so long as Yuji can remain standing, while Hakari beats the ever-loving shit out of him. Hakari finally settles down and decides to listen to the gang and finds out Gojo is sealed. Upon hearing this, he decides that he will help in the Culling Games. At this point, Kagane first appears to inform the gang that a rule has been added to the Culling Games by a sorcerer known as Kashimo Hajime. The gang then decides to target only players with over 100 points, Kashimo Hajime and Higuruma Hiromi. We then formally introduce to Hiromi, whose curse technique revolves around the courtroom trial. Finally, we get to see the colonies will look like as we see the Sendai colony for the first time and learn that Kenjaku has been escorting humans out to the outside who don't wish to play in the game. We learn how much time is left till Sumiki must declare her participation in the Culling Games. Finally, the group, Yuji, Megumi, Panda, and Hakari enter the colonies to fight within the Culling Games. As Megumi and Yuji enter the barrier, we see them drop from a great height, and it's confirmed that this is an unspoken rule to space out the players at random points in the Culling Games. Upon falling, Yuji is immediately attacked by a sorcerer in the games. Yuji manages to counter by literally throwing a rock charged with cursed energy, only to be greeted by yet another sorcerer. Megumi finds himself also in a similar situation fighting with a sorcerer off drop. We learn that the girl's name is Remy and she agrees to take Megumi to Hiromi. Yuji continues to fight the propeller head and lands a direct hit, stunning him, then finishing him off with a kick. We see that Yuji and Megumi are being misled by the two sorcerers they've met, but it's not clear who's telling the truth and who isn't. It turns out Megumi was fooled and Hiromi was not where Remy had said she was. We're then shown Yuji meeting with Hiromi, who was just chilling in a bathtub casually. Yuji asks if they can use his 100 points to add the rule, and Hiromi says no. Hiromi and Yuji then get ready to fight it out. Hiromi almost instantly uses his domain expansion as I mentioned before. His curse technique revolves around the courtroom and how a trial would take place. Yuji fails the first set of questions and Judgman takes away his ability to control cursed energy. While Yuji is slowly getting beaten, he realizes that he can call for a retrial, instantly teleporting them both back into the domain. Judgman then accuses Yuji of mass murder in Shibuya, which Yuji almost instantly admits and says he is guilty of. Judgman then declares the death penalty upon Yuji. Hiromi, feeling sad for Yuji, releases his curse technique and then offers to give the 100 points to him that he needs. We then cut back to Megumi, who is having to fight a 3-on-1 fight against other sorcerers in the Culling Game. Megumi kills one of the sorcerers, gaining 5 points, leaving it in a 2-on-1 fight. Just as one of the sorcerers fires his technique at Megumi, none other than Fumihiko Takaba joins the fray. Takaba tries to lighten the mood, only to have no one laugh at his joke. He then drop kicks Hazunoki. Takaba then proceeds to beat the ever-loving shit out of Hazunoki, even hitting him with an old poke up the ass. Takaba and Megumi split up, taking on their respective opponents, and Megumi finally decides to get serious. Megumi begins to fight with Reggie. Reggie then reveals his technique can recreate a contract from old receipts. He then shows a receipt from a spa that he uses basically as a phoenix down to essentially fully heal himself. Megumi decides that the best course of action here is to just make like Mahito and run away. Megumi lures Reggie into an empty gym and activates his domain expansion. Reggie counters with his own technique, Hollow Wicker Basket. Reggie proceeds to try and use Megumi's domain expansion against him, only to find out Megumi drops his max elephant right on top of him. Reggie manages to escape from under the weight of max element and then drops a house, like a literal house, on top of Megumi. Megumi, using quick thinking, grabs Reggie and drags him into the water of the pool that was in the gymnasium, using the weight that Reggie had put on him to his advantage. Megumi and Reggie continue the fight in hand-to-hand combat, having exhausted each other's cursed energy. While the fight ensues, Reggie banks on Megumi, stepping away to summon a Shikigami and to use that as his opener to finish the fight. But what Reggie completely forgot about is that Divine Dog was still active this entire time and instead loses the fight. Cutting back to Takaba and Hazanoki, the two burst onto the rooftop while still fighting. Gogain informs Hazanoki of Reggie's death, and all of a sudden Hazanoki has no desire to continue fighting at all. We're then given this absolutely massive bombshell about Takaba and his curse technique. Takaba's curse technique is the comedian, meaning that whatever he finds funny can be made a reality. This power can even rival Gojo, which to me is crazy. We then cut back to Megumi's Divine Dog standing over Remy, and it is about to kill him. As Megumi has a flash of his sister telling him no, he dispels the Divine Dog and then he collapses. We then see none other than Hana Kurusu herself floating above Megumi. We're then introduced to some of the other players inside of the Culling Games: Druv, Lakdawala, Ryu, Ishigori, and Takako Uro, and a cursed spirit that Kenjaku had freed called Kuroroshi. We learn that these players are all in a stalemate. That is, until Akotu had killed Druv. As it turns out, 3 months after the night of the parade of 100 demons, Akotu came back to become a special grade sorcerer, second only to Gojo Satoru in unusual abilities. Akotu is seen helping out the locals when Kuroroshi makes its move and attacks the locals, cleaving one of them in half brutally. Akotu finally comes face to face with Kuroroshi, and the two prepare to fight, while Akotu swears he will be the one to kill Kenjaku. Akotu fights with Kuroroshi, and just as all seems defeated, Akotu literally bites its nose off, like for real. This one Akotu got that dog in him. Just as Akotu is recovering, Takako appears next to him and whispers some naughty things inside of his ear. Takako and Akotu start fight. Takako reveals her technique can use the very sky as a surface that she can grab and use how she pleases. Akotu and Takako have a small conversation before being interrupted by Ryu, who uses his granite blast. All three players decide to take each other out. Akotu closes the distance on Ryu and the two begin to fight. Ryu fires another granite blast at Akotu, and Akotu deflects it with his bare hands. Takako interferes by slapping Akotu to the ground with her technique. Ryu turns around to call her a pile of vomit, only for Takako to fire back by calling him a dickhead. A truly wonderful exchange of words right there. Akotu finally gets serious by calling on Rika to help fight against the two powerhouses before him. Rika then appears next to Akotu and offers him a weapon to choose from. We then get some explanation into Akotsu's technique, and it basically means that while Rika is active, Akotsu's cursed energy is almost limitless for 5 minutes, and that is how long he can hold a connection with Rika. Akotu opens up by using cursed speech on Takako while Rika fights with Ryu. As the battle heats up, all three decide to use the domain expansions. Kuroroshi finally rejoins the battle after a quick little regeneration nap. As all three domains go off with the same amount of cursed energy, it causes all three of the domains to crumble. While they are all fallen, Akotsu makes use of the opening to kick Takako towards Kuroroshi, and she loses her arm to it. Ryu, also seeing an opening, uses his granite blast on Takako after losing her arm to Kuroroshi, almost killing Takako and decimating Kuroroshi. Akotsu lands the final blow on the roach spirit, and all that is left is the final two, Akotsu and Ryu. Akotsu and Ryu fire granite blasts at each other, both enjoying their fight to the maximum. In one final flurry of attacks, Akotsu declares himself the winner as the last granite blast from Ryu that Akotsu had redirected lands on top of him. We then cut to Hakari, who's riding a Ferris wheel with a fighter in the Culling Games who's named Bernard, who's an aspiring mangaka. He mentioned he doesn't have a reason to be fighting in the Culling Game, and he wants Hakari to say something mean to him, basically, that's gonna make him want to fight. So naturally, Hakari obliges and tells him he'd never read his manga even if he begged him to, and Bernard then gets worked up by this and the two begin to fight. Hakari ends up being marked by Bernard's technique, which allows Bernard to see 1 second into the future, but Hakari picks up to the speed and attacks faster than Bernard can react to, even though Bernard can actually see it. Hakari wastes no time in activating his domain expansion. Remember how I said that Hakari was a gambler and that was important for later on? This is what I was referring into. His domain is called Idle Death Gamble, and depending on the results of different pachinko machines, he gains different powers based on those results. Both Bernard and Hakari continue to fight, with Bernard landing a significant blow onto Hakari. It's then revealed that Hakari hits a 333 jackpot and is able to counterattack against Bernard. I will be honest and say that Hakari's domain is one of the most complicated ones in the series, if not the most complicated ones, but it's also the most interesting you'll ever see, and you'll see why a little bit later on. We cut over to Panda, who's also in the colonies right now, and we see that Panda runs into Kashimo, one of the other players with 100 points. Kashimo consults with Kogain to find out whether Panda is actually a real player or not. Kogain confirms that Panda is a player, and Kashimo wastes no time in attacking Panda. Kashimo rushes Panda and blows a hole in his stomach. In a short-lived but brutal fight, Kashimo utterly destroys Panda and then asks where Sakuna is. Shortly after this, none other than Hakari joins the fray. We don't get to see it happen, but we presume that Bernard is dead at the hands of Hakari at this point. Hakari wastes no time and is punching Kashimo through metal containers. We then get to see this insane panel of Hakari overflowing with cursed energy, seemingly an effect from his previous domain when fighting Bernard. Kashimo manages to charge up enough electricity to blow Hakari's arm off, but we learn that in the previous fight, Hakari had hit a jackpot, so for 4 minutes and 11 seconds, Hakari has unlimited cursed energy and can also use reversed curse technique to heal himself almost instantaneously from any wounds inflicted, essentially making himself unstoppable, unkillable for those 4 minutes and 11 seconds. What's even more impressive is after those 4 minutes and 11 seconds, Hakari can open his domain expansion again, so long as Hakari hits a jackpot every time. Like I said, Hakari's domain is one of the most complicated ones, but it's also one of the most interesting ones for this reason. I can literally only describe it as some of the most well-written plot armor I've ever seen. The two continue to fight and Hakari hits a jackpot once again. Kashimo says that he may be unkillable, but I'll kill him anyway. And I know it's a long way off, but I can't wait to see this fight get animated. Truly one of my favourite fights in the Culling Games arc. We then get to see this flashback between Kashimo and Kajaku, where Kashimo is looking for the strongest sorcerer around, and Kajaku tells Kashimo that it's actually Sakuna who is the strongest that he knows of. This will be where Kajaku and Kashimo made their contract for Kashimo to be resurrected into the Culling Games so he could fight Sakuna in current day times. Cutting back to the fight, we see that the two are thoroughly enjoying their time, literally playing ping pong with a shipping container and their fists. Kashimo lands a heavy blow onto Hakari, taking half of his face off. Kashimo shoots electricity into the head of Hakari, intended to end the fight by destroying his head, but instead, Hakari heals his face and forcibly pushes out the electricity out of his nose with the cursed energy. As it turns out, Kashimo had been storing electrical rods throughout the shipping yard and called the electricity back through a route that he had chosen. Hakari happens to be stood right in front of. The blow lands and Hakari is left with a massive hole in his side, but it didn't matter because Hakari could still use his domain again, having hit a jackpot in the previous one. Remember what I said about Hakari's domain being some of the best plot armor ever? Well, the man hits a jackpot again and heals from this attack. Hakari has then shifted the coordinates of his domain when he opened it, so that when he closed the domain, they bit over water. Kashimo's weakness, since his cursed energy has the special attribute of electricity. As Hakari is watching from afar, he starts to feel faint due to Kashimo using electrolysis to create chlorine gas from the water that Kashimo had dropped into to knock out Hakari. We then learn that even someone with reverse curse technique can be killed by either the toxins or destroying the brain in one fell swoop. Hakari manages to target the toxins in his body individually and push them out of his nose, and the two continue fighting once more. Kashimo then seemingly blows up the water around them. Kashimo then climbs out of the water, and we see a miniature panda watching onward as the fight sort of comes to an end. Kashimo had used all of his cursed energy to attack Hakari, but Hakari manages to survive due to Hakari making a last-minute binding vow to sacrifice his arm in order to protect the rest of his body. We then learn that Kashimo never once used his curse technique throughout the entirety of the fight and is saving it for Sakuna himself. We then learn that Bernard is actually alive and well, and Nishijima arrives to let Hakari know that Maki can actually pass through the barriers. We then see this panel of Maki looking incredibly sinister. Noritoshi is back, and he's back with a brand new look. Also, this change confused me the first time I read it, but now it makes sense to me that I'm rereading it. We next see this incredibly powerful cursed spirit appear in the sky. We then get a flashback that reveals that none other than Suguru, Geto had taken over the Kamo clan and is its 25th head. Cutting back to the present day, we see Maki and Noritoshi looking at the cursed spirit as it dives down to attack. The spirit moves so fast that Noritoshi couldn't even understand or see what had happened. Remember when I said that it's super important how Naoya was killed? Because he wasn't killed with a curse tool and instead was killed with a regular kitchen knife. He wasn't exercised and instead transformed into what we see here, a vengeful cursed spirit. Naoya reveals to Maki who it was that killed him. Maki and Naoya begin to fight. Naoya starts to transform into a cursed spirit and Noritoshi uses piercing blood to finish the kill before the transformation is complete. However, the attack doesn't work and Naoya completes his transformation and wastes no time encountering with Noritoshi. Noritoshi somehow survives the punch but notes that if he hadn't blocked in time, he would have lost his head and his arm. Noritoshi and Maki then begin to fight the newly transformed Naoya. We learn that although Naoya is now a cursed spirit, he still is able to use his curse technique. Naoya backs up to the sky to gain speed in order to attack Maki. Naoya manages to hit Maki with an attack that reached Mach 3. Noritoshi joins up with Maki and Maki asks for 5 minutes to heal herself while Noritoshi holds off Naoya. Noritoshi and Naoya then begin to fight, and as things are starting to look bad for Noritoshi, 2 random sources show up screaming the words sumo and katana out of nowhere. We then learn that the guy screaming for a katana is a Culling Game player by the name of Daido Hagane, and the guy screaming about sumo is also a player in the Culling Games by the name of Miyu Rokujishi, and they both want one thing each, a katana and for someone to sumo with. Maki's sword all of a sudden flies into the hands of Daido, who was screaming for a katana. Everyone on the battlefield is terrified at the presence of this man holding the katana for one reason. It wasn't his cursed energy, it was the fact of his sheer lethality with that blade in his hand. Daido seemingly speaks to the blade after it lands in his hand, stating that the katana has chosen its wielder, and then he attacks Naoya. We then learn that because of Daido having no cursed energy, he can't actually see Naoya, but instead he can see everything around Naoya and is still able to cut him. Maki then questions what is actually the difference between Toji, Zenin, and her, and all of a sudden she is pulled into a simple domain to sumo with Mio. Maki agrees to a sumo bout and the domain closes on the pair. Maki and Mio end up having a sumo match, while also Mio is teaching her where she is going wrong, almost like therapy in a way. The simple domain breaks and we see Maki proclaiming herself to be at her best. Mio's domain is explained to us and it's basically a miniature version of the hyperbolic time chamber. In the time it took for 1,000 bouts of sumo between the pair, the domain only lasted a mere minute in the real world outside. We then get this panel of Naoya getting angry because he is unable to catch Maki, even when he is so much faster. We then get this panel of Maki seeing the air around her in a different way. We see her talking about the difference in air density and temperature. All she needed to do was seize them. Maki seemingly grabs the air to redirect herself and land a clean hit onto Naoya. Daido, Maki, and Mio all land hits onto Naoya, cutting him in half, and then Naoya transforms one final time. The human body of Naoya comes out of one half of the previous body and activates his domain expansion. Mio and Daido get caught inside the domain and are attacked on a cellular level. Suddenly, Maki stabs Naoya in the chest and it's revealed that because of Maki's heavenly restriction, the domain doesn't count Maki as a human, but rather a building with no cursed energy, and Maki can freely come and go as she pleases. Maki then slices Naoya cleanly in half and wins the fight. It's then confirmed that Maki Zenin is now on par with Toji Zenin. Cutting back to Megumi, we see him wake up in a hotel room with Yuji, Hanakurusu, and Takaba all there. Megumi and the gang have all accumulated enough points to help his sister, and then they ask Hanakurusu if she knows about a player by the name of Angel, only to have a mouth on the side of Hana's face answer that she is in fact Angel. The gang confirms that Angel will help with the unsealing of Gojo Satoru in return for a favour, and that favour is that they have to kill a player known as the Disgraced One. Sukuna then reveals to Yuji that he is in fact the Disgraced One that Angel wants to kill. Yuji tries to signal to Megumi by way of basically interpretive dance that Sukuna inside of him is in fact a Disgraced One. We then learn that over 807 people have entered the colony of the Culling Games all of a sudden. We then get this flashback to November 2018 where we see Kenjaku meeting with world leaders to inform them of the Culling Games and the existence of cursed energy in hopes of the world leaders joining forces with him. We're introduced to a man named Cyrus Vale, who I personally believe is more to him than meets the eye. Check out my other video on that topic. Cyrus proclaims that cursed energy could replace all of their energy sources as the cleanest energy in history. We're then introduced to a man called Gary K. Johnson, who's a lieutenant for the US military, where Kenjaku is trying to convince him to invade the Culling Games in order to abduct Japanese sorcerers for experiments to harness their cursed energy. Gary is skeptical about how powerful cursed energy could be, so they decide to test it out against the special ops that Gary has outside of the Overworld. central office. The test goes ahead, and Kenjaku, as predicted, makes light work of all of the soldiers by dropping them from the sky in front of Gary. Gary runs outside only to see a massive Shikigami that Kenjaku had summoned and is sat atop the White House. Kenjaku then says, if we're done here, let's talk about hunting sorcerers. And there you have it. Every major event from Gojo's settling to current date. I hope you enjoyed this video as much as I did making it. It was nice to refresh my memory on everything that has happened for when the manga returns from its break next week. And if you did enjoy the video, make sure to like and subscribe. And as always, I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.